Hello and welcome to Meet Our Ex's Success Stories podcast. I'm host and coach Amanda Lea, and I'm stoked to speak with our guest today. He's a gastroenterologist, and he aims to empower his patients to embark on a journey of self-healing using the philosophy of let food be thy medicine. Thanks for joining us to share your own fat-burning basics, Dr. Pran.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for having me on as well.
It's our pleasure. Let's get started. So please tell us about your diet before you began eating this way.
Sure. I think, I've always maintained a diet that I previously thought was pretty healthy. I kind of maintained a very high fiber diet, lots of cereals, lots of grains, lots of vegetables, felt guilty about eating meat, the usual approach. In particular, I applied a lot of what I'd learned through med school in terms of nutrition, which is that, saturated fat's bad, red meat's bad, a lot of lean cuts of protein. And I just noticed in my mid-30s that my blood pressure was creeping up and my ability to exercise, I could see was waning. I was losing motivation in the gym, and I've always been big on exercise, and I could see my body shape changing. Coming from a family of males that had always developed diabetes and heart disease, I thought kind of this was just inevitable and just a function of my genetics. But in my mid-30s, I started exploring things like the Atkins diet and the high protein approaches. And when I ran into a lot of what ShawnBaker was doing, I was fascinated by what he was up to. And when I initially observed him, I thought, well, this is fantastic. Exploring it now, or getting into it and digging deeper into it now, I can see that this diet has been very, very positive for me. Approaching 40 now, and I just feel like my entire ability to and physicality has changed, which has been fantastic.
That's amazing. That's a huge benefit. I mean, I think a lot of us are feeling that way. I'm also 40 and 80 baby, and I feel really good having seen how the impact is not, my family is not determining what I'm going to be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's huge. Yeah. And thanks to Dr. ShawnBaker as well. This insight has been helpful, but you're also helping so many people. So tell us a little more about how you implement now your way of eating.
Sure. I tend to be very intuitive, Amanda, about the way I eat now. I just find that hunger is just not a non-issue. I don't know if it's the same for yourself. I tend to see it a lot across a lot of my patients where high protein approach, you're just not hungry. So it's not that I go out of my way to fast. I just simply eat when I'm hungry, which works out to be 1 or 2 meals a day, generally 2. So the way I tend to do it now, I'm very cognizant of the fact that I require protein just to be able to keep up with my my activity in the gym and in theatre and physicality of it all. Being a father of 3 as well. Yeah, I tend to enjoy a really nice lunch, whether it's a 1 or 2 o'clock, lots of eggs in my diet. I tend to make up a lot of the protein with eggs. Some days where I'm eating close to 10, 20 eggs even. And I generally tend to finish my days off with as much red meat as I can fit in. I think in terms of red meat, it tends to be bang for your buck. There's just so much micronutrient density packed into that. I tend to vary it. We are very lucky here in Australia. We tend to have good access to venison and kangaroo and great game meats, a lot of grass-fed sort of cattle as well, grass-fed finished. So I tend to eat that way and try and keep it as close to how our ancestors would have done it, I suppose, with regards to how they would have eaten. So I tend to really enjoy it, and it never gets boring. Still doing it a few years on, and still not bored by this method of eating, which is interesting.
That's excellent. And yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of intuitive eating. It's funny though, I'm having to adjust everything now because I thought I was intuitive before, but really it was addiction driving me, carb addiction a little bit. But yeah,
Yes.
I feel that I'm there now. So do you specifically try to get a certain amount of fat in, or do you do the same with your fat intake versus protein, and just by eating the cuts you want? Or and what about other plant foods like spices or coffee or teas or anything like that? Do you go there?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, coffee is my weakness. I'll admit that, and I generally just tend to enjoy it black, or with a bit of butter and MCT oil. Sometimes, because I'm relatively lean now, I find that I know when my fat levels are dropping and I need to sort of supplement a bit. But generally, I don't go out of my way to overeat fat. I never track fat as a macronutrient. I will generally eat protein and let it bring its fat with it. So things like eggs tend to be quite rich in fats, and as the same applies to red meat. I'll let the red meat bring its fat. I never go out of my way to overeat it. Occasionally I'll throw in things like bone marrow and things like that if I can feel my energy levels dipping. But I tend not to be one of these guys that's eating bacon and cream and heaps of cheese and things like that. I try and prefer a leaner cut of protein.
That's excellent. Great. Wow. So how is it now in your life? I guess you've got a handle on certain health conditions, if you want to tell us a little bit more about that, but also maybe what it's like with your family and people in your
Sure.
life eating this way.
Sure. I mean, the longer I've done it, the more I've just gravitated towards protein. I think my diet's now primarily animal or fish-based foods. Sometimes at night time, I'll have a little bit of a very low carbohydrate type mix, nut mix or a trail mix with a little bit of milk, just to satisfy that glycogen hunger. Which I think most of us crave. I think Sean's amazing in his approach to it. I can't do quite what he does, but my diet is 90 to 99% animal based. So in terms of my family, I'm aware of the fact that children are very high energy beasts. Their brains are growing, I let my children kind of eat what they want. However, what we tend to limit in the house is processed foods and a lot of refined sugars. My children eat a lot of fruits. They'll eat some vegetables, but we tend to prioritize protein for them, especially at night time. Their diet is primarily protein, in particular at night. But it's very difficult to do that for school lunches and things like that, because they tend to follow the school pyramid, the food pyramid in schools, and unless the diet's kind of catered in that way, it's impossible to satisfy their requirements. So we're not as strict on the kids as we are on ourselves, I suppose, as adults.
That's entirely fair. That's entirely fair. They are kids, but that's great. And wow. So thank you so much. Is there anything else that, because you are, not everybody thinks that food should be your philosophy and works that way with their patients. Is there anything else for people watching that you might want to share for them to consider?
Sure. Yeah. Look, I think this is a very powerful approach, Amanda. I think the way we stand in terms of the healthcare sector, it's really a emerging tsunami of ill health, and it's all non-sustainable. 10 years from now, I don't think we can apply this approach and expect things to be as they were, so to speak. We're fast running out of the ability to economically support this burden of illness. I don't know what it's like in America, but it's certainly going to be this way in Australia, I think, shortly. So it's just a great way to do it, where you're not dependent on the health system, or not as much anyway. And you really have the energy levels to be able to exert yourself. And you see these minor changes in tweaks to your diet and what they do to your physicality. They increase your ability to be less frail. They increase your motivation for exercise. They increase your energy levels. I'd rather have that approach any day than an approach which is a drug to bring down a blood pressure, or a drug to bring down cholesterol, or a drug to treat gout. I'd rather that we take a lifestyle approach to it. And I think most people would. I just think they need the right guidance, and we need to break down myths. And again, hats off to people like Shawn that have been brave enough to do it on a large scale.
Absolutely. Very well said. And thank you for sharing your story, because it's also very inspiring. I think that people, like you said, it's a big issue, and Shawn's mission of health creation is something I think we are all on board with. I'm in Canada, Shawn in the States, you in Australia. I mean, it's everywhere. We're all, so people like yourself, people are looking all the time to practitioners and medicine. So thank you for doing what you do. And thank you for sharing your story with us today so that you can inspire even more. And just have a great day. Feel fab.
Brilliant. Thank you, Amanda. Thanks for having me on again.
Thank you, Dr. Pranavan Yoganathan.
See you later.